Good morning, everyone. And being a former academic, I'll fill in here as they're getting the technical difficulties out of the way. So if you actually Google Sciammarella, what you'll see is actually not only myself, but my father, who was a professor at IIT in the mechanical engineering department, who helped pioneer the experimental mechanics lab there at IIT. So I also attended IIT, if you can believe that, with the free tuition. Why wouldn't you? As the son of a faculty member. So I studied my degrees in metallurgy and material science. So once I finished my doctorate, as I was finishing my doctorate, I would spend some time just out here on Adams Street because my wife was attending here and taking the business and law school degrees. So it's a really honor to be here today. This is the first time I've actually been in the building. I was sat out in the street waiting for her, so it's nice to see where she spent a lot of her time. Anyways, it's really exciting because as a Chicagoan myself, I grew up in Chicago. It's great to see all the activity that's ongoing here with regards to cyber, digital, and technology. And IIT is at that crossroads where you can get the experience and education, but also the interaction with all the companies that are here in the Midwest and that are leading these efforts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where I'm at today, and just as we're getting this ready, I'd like to see a show of hands. Has anyone heard of MxD? Show of hands if you've heard of MxD. 1, 2. All right, that's not bad. That's not bad. As mentioned, MxD stands for Manufacturing Times Digital. So we were stood up in 2014. We are one of 16 manufacturing innovation institutes that President Obama started back in 2012 after the economic collapse, when they recognized they needed to do something to help bolster U.S. manufacturing, right? And so the first pilot institute was America Makes. That's a focus on additive manufacturing, and we're actually the second institute with a focus on digital manufacturing. So we were previously known as DMDII, but then got stood up, and we're very close, and I'm getting through a few slides, so we'll save some time here. But really, what's exciting is that I wanted to come here today to talk about what we're doing and what we define as this cyber resilience really for manufacturing, because as I was gonna say, in the Midwest, it's one of the largest net value producers is manufacturing, right? And so I think one of the statistics that I'll show later is how critical manufacturing is to the economy. At any rate, these are the 16 institutes that I was talking about. If you're not familiar with them, I strongly encourage you to look them up at manufacturingusa.org. But as I said, we're probably the best because we cut across all of these fields. We're looking at things from design to the factory floor to supply chain. So what I would say here is that really the importance of cyber, as I said, cuts across all these different disciplines. And from a manufacturing standpoint, it's not really just about the IT side of things, but actually the OT, so the operational technology side, so the physical equipment that is present in these manufacturing facilities. So here's, again, a little bit history about who we are. We have close to 300 members. We actually have a great facility on Goose Island, so I would strongly encourage you to come visit if you've never been. And since I only saw 2 hands, I'm taking a guess that no one's been there. So, but it's great because you get to see digital, you get to see cyber in action. And that's really what I wanted to show and talk about today, is how do you make people understand something that is really hard to see or comprehend. We've gotten a lot of funding from the Department of Defense. They're our main supporter. And so our funding is used to serve several purposes, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's really important to know that we are a public-private partnership. We are here to help any of you and all of you, whether you're connected directly or indirectly to manufacturing. As was said earlier, even though you're not a cybersecurity expert, you have expertise and experience that will help us in this journey, because much like the bad actors, we have to work together, right? The bad faith actors in cyber, they're not saying, hey, what experience do you have? They're just going out and attacking and sharing information, because that's how they grow. And so we need to be the same way. So if you're from Florida and you can't make it to Chicago, we actually have a virtual tour now, so you can visit that and see our facilities. And it's really great because you can understand what we're doing from afar, and there's a lot of resources on our website, a few of which I'll talk about today. So these are our investment areas. So it's not just about R&D. We use our funding to also demonstrate. So as we fund projects, as we'd say, that are too large for any one entity to solve alone, some of those projects, we've funded over 100 projects, $125 million. We demonstrate what those are. In 2019, we were actually designated the National Center for Cybersecurity in Manufacturing, right? So again, the key here, DoD understanding that manufacturing as a whole is a critical asset for the country. If we cannot produce, right, we are going to be in trouble, right? There's a value add that manufacturing brings, and we have to reimagine what that looks like and empower the manufacturers today. And I'll paint a little landscape of what that means and why it's so critical. And then really this other aspect that's critical to us is the workforce of the future. Okay, so it was great. We didn't even coordinate, but the President Raj talked about that education piece, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why we think it's so critical, because there are jobs that are needed, critical, that are for tomorrow, that we need to train the people today to make sure we have that workforce. So kudos to IIT for taking the lead on that. So these are a few ways in which our members can engage with us. We do a lot of programming. We have, as I said, a facility where we host a lot of workshops and events. We just had EY in yesterday for a big event they had, and there's a few events today. So it's very busy at our facility once again, so that's really nice. And then we also have projects, as I mentioned. So out of that programming, we come up with what are the pain points that industry is facing, particularly in manufacturing, that we need to help try to solve. So we then announce projects on our webpage. We actually have a few out right now. There's actually one on OT test methods for cybersecurity. So developing playbooks and how-to for manufacturers to understand the importance and what they can do to gain a clear case of what's the return on investment, right? Because that's often the key roadblock. Well, what do I need to do? How much is it going to cost me? But rather than thinking about it that way, it's actually going to give you a business advantage, right? Once you become cyber resilient, and bring you more business than be costly to you. And the final piece there is the test beds that we have on site. So it's really nice because you can see, as I said, and understand what digital means or what cyber means, but then you can use our facilities to learn and to train and to understand, right? You don't have to go, or I would not encourage. Oftentimes people will try to say, hey, let's just go to manufacturer and test out this new equipment, or hey, let's hack your system. That's not going to happen. So again, our facility is here and available for those kinds of things. And we're actually having a really big event at the end of June in partnership with the National Center for Manufacturing Services. It's a DoD-run workshop on additive, but there's actually a cyber track on there. We're going to do a red hat, blue hat. So again, if you have any questions on that, let me know. I can send you the registration link. But really, these test beds are a great asset to what we have and is of value to our members. So just very quickly, what is Industry 4.0, right? We talk about it, right? You can't go, well, often, as I say, you can't do cyber if, you have to do cyber if you're going digital, and the pandemic has taught us, if anything, especially with remote working, that digital is here to stay, and so we have to understand that if we're going to do that, we have to be secure about it. So you could do a lot of hits, or you're going to see about, I think this morning, I do it every week, about 4.5 billion hits on Industry 4.0. So imagine if you're a manufacturer, or even if I Googled cybersecurity for manufacturing, It's not 4.5 billion. I think it's a couple billion. But what do you do? Where do you go? What do you, where do you start? So it's that overwhelming feeling you get. And so again, as an institute, what we try to do is describe what are these practices, how you can do it, and then with our network, expand the capabilities. What I also want to provide is a little landscape here. So understanding that the manufacturing community is really predicated around small businesses. So that statistic there is that 98%, right, is fewer than 500 employees. I think 75% is 20 or less, right? I'm going to do this so I don't have to look at the screen. What I think is important to understand here is that there's no roadmap or guide of what do I do, how do I incorporate digital, how do I, on top of that, do cyber. And so it's very confusing for people. And as I say, cybersecurity has to be a part of your digital transformation. You cannot go digital and then say, oh, wait, I got to do cyber, right? But oftentimes you have companies that are already, have these brownfields, right? They can't, and so they have to go back. And so how do we do this, again, to be cost effective? So these are the things that we're working on to provide that understanding. Again, as I always try to do, these are the facts, right? The scary statistics out there. And I'm not going to read all of them, but one I will tell you about is in 2019, manufacturing was number 10 on the cybersecurity threat list. Today, it's a number 1, okay? And you've heard it in the news over the last few weeks or months. It's about disrupting our capabilities in manufacturing. Doesn't matter if you work for the DoD or doesn't matter if you're part of a manufacturing entity. If you can cause disruption, right, and I'll show some examples of that, then you're going to win, right? You're going to cripple your enemy. And that's what they want to do today, right? They want to cripple us by any means necessary and anywhere. And when we talk about these small businesses of 20 or less employees, those are the targets, right? And that's what we have to protect against. So I'm sure, or hopefully, none of you have seen this before. This was back in 2017, right? And we'll talk more about it today, but ransomware, right? What do you do? Okay, and these are the facts, right? And understanding that this was a widespread effect that had tremendous impact on the business community, and I'm going to show a few examples of that. But it starts with just simple steps, and really, as I'll talk about and tell you today, people are the number one way to defend against these things, right? It's not the technology, it's not, your framework, it's the people that you work for. And so you have to train your people. You have to give them the tools. You have to give them the resources. You have to believe in them, and you have to let them know that they are the first line of defense. We look at some of these case studies in terms of ransomware, right? And these are, real numbers, over $150 million. But you can see how they had production stopped, right? For a manufacturer, sure, it's bad if you lose a customer's information, right, or a credit card number or something like that. But when they can physically stop your production and you're not generating value, that is a game changer, right? And they talk about, as I showed in the previous statistics, that 60% of those businesses will go out of business as a result of these hacks. Merck, right? This was the NotPetya, right? Not too long after, right? They thought it was a ransomware, but really it was intended to wipe out information on systems, and that started in the Ukraine, right? There was a company that had similar to QuickBooks that got infected through one of those Microsoft portals or patches, and then went and wreaked havoc across the world. And I think 15 million is a conservative estimate. I think it's in the several billions, right? And that's the other thing we don't talk about. You don't hear about it in the news, but it's happening every day. Companies are going out of business, right? And so we also have to learn that we have to, at some stage, be able to feel comfortable about sharing these things. Yes, it's bad, and yes, it looks difficult to admit, hey, we've had a problem. But if we don't share this information with each other, then we become at greater risk. And as I said, the bad guys are sharing as much as they can and acting as fast as they can. And so we really need to work together in this space. So as I mentioned, this is where we're at with the manufacturers. 70%, 75% are 20 or less employees. So I highly doubt they have a CISO or anyone to do IT. Maybe it's their, I have a colleague of mine whose best friend runs a company, and their IT is a kid who lives down the street, right, that knows how to handle computers. Again, it is what it is, but how do we work and how do we provide those kinds of companies that are the targets the access they need? That's what we're thinking about. So why are manufacturers attractive? As we say here, they're easy to exploit because they're not really aware or understand, or they don't think that they're a target, right? And then again, it's about learning and understanding what you have in your assets. How do you secure them? And as I said, go through some basic things which I'll talk about and share with you today that can make you more resilient. So for me, as I said, it's really about changing that mindset, right? It's not a matter of if, but when you get hacked, okay? You're gonna get hacked. It doesn't matter, again, if you're a manufacturer, financial, it's gonna happen. And when it happens, you have to be ready and you have to understand where you stand and what you can do to overcome that. And so if we do that, I think we become better prepared for what comes after that. So these are really the challenges that manufacturers face often. And maybe it's similar to other industries, but right, how do we scale this up without blowing our budget? Well, how do I manage all the tools and the technology, right? It's very difficult. As I said, if you've got 20 or less employees, you don't really have extra capacity to take on these new things. So on the bottom there, where do I find the skills and the talent, right? How do I afford that? And really there on the right, just where do I start? And so again, this is where we look at it and try to give them and demonstrate things very easily, low cost, to really get them to understand that this is possible if they just take the steps. And so this is part of a larger presentation, but I thought this was an important slide to show, is there are a lot of guidelines out there. And so again, it's also a bit confusing. So we kind of talk about these in three categories, right? Where you have less coverage in terms of specificity on the cybersecurity, but it takes much more effort, right? So, and I'll show some examples on the NIST cybersecurity framework, which really have some really nice starting points or concepts to build off of, and then really allow people to understand. And you can go all the way to the right where you have the NIST, right, the 800-171. Again, we talk about this more in our cyber roadshow about CMMC requirements. I don't know, people have heard about the CMMC requirements? Raise hands, okay. Right, so this is if you're gonna do any work for Department of Defense, this is being rolled out over the next few years. But there's talk of that, as I've just said, all people are gonna be impacted, right? This is not just about the DoD. So perhaps there will be some spillover to industry at large with regards to CMMC. So again, as a public-private partnership, our role is how do we bridge that gap between industry and government and make that transition easy and provide the lessons learned from this process with the manufacturers. So as I mentioned back in 2019 in the NDAA language, we were stood up to have the National Center for Cybersecurity and Manufacturing, and really this is followed by the executive order that just came out in May in terms of understanding what we need to do as a country, right, to help ourselves. And these are some of the things from that executive order. And so with all of this, it really fits the mission that I'm going to talk about with regards to who we are and what we do in cyber. So as we say, our role here is to secure America's supply chain. We do this through these 4 pillars, building awareness, the tools, the workforce, and support and compliance. So I'll just briefly touch on these here, but I'll give you some specific examples of what we're doing and how this enables people to become more resilient. In our training and awareness, we have our 10,000 manufacturer awareness campaign. I'll talk more about that, but really giving the basics for people to understand why this is important to them, why it should be part of their thought process. And as I said, really as a case for improving their business, not just a business cost. I'll next talk about some of the tools and services that we've just launched that we feel are a great resource for those small businesses that don't have the time to go through them. And then I will touch on some of the workforce development efforts that we're doing, because again, you cannot emphasize that enough. I cannot emphasize that enough, the importance of having individuals trained in these areas that are difficult to understand, but we've pulled an effort together with our hiring guide that I'll talk more about later. That's actually a free resource for you to download. And I won't touch much on the standards compliance, but we do, as I said, a whole roadshow where we talk about the difference between the different standards and, as I said, understanding what CMMC is all about. So in terms of our cyber awareness campaign, we do this in a number of ways, but as I said, the main purpose is to make manufacturers aware. So we have our website with great content. We have our direct engagements that I'll talk about later with our road shows and tabletop exercises that we're bringing around and doing with manufacturers at different sites. Again, for them to see it, right? Manufacturers, and I would say humans in general, they're much better at seeing things in action or doing things to have that sink in than rather sit and watch a PowerPoint presentation. So in terms of content, we do general content on awareness. We have relevant content with regards to our hiring guide. We have engaged content. There's actually a cybersecurity for manufacturing operational technology course that I'll talk about later that we developed in partnership with the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, that ties back to the work we're doing in our hiring guide. So it brings this full circle. In terms of our outreach, we have general outreach. We have very relevant outreach with the demonstrations, and I'll show those a little later. And then our engaged outreach in terms of the tabletop exercises. You know, what happens when your organization is hacked, say through a injection through a thumb drive or things of that nature. So walking through those, and it's amazing when you get people involved, right? And here we're not just talking about the engineers, but the people in HR, the people in finance, right? How do you walk through those things and understand, people's perceptions of what needs to be done, right? Phishing campaigns, a lot of people talk about phishing campaigns, and it's interesting because we say it's not just about deleting, but it's about alerting the IT team, because as soon as you alert them, right, they know that there's something going on in the network, and they can ensure that it doesn't go throughout the network and then cause further havoc. So with regard to our marketplace, I think this is very exciting. As I said, we just launched it last month. We have the ability to do these low-cost self-paced assessments, right? So it's a kind of step-through guide with simple questions that anyone can answer. You don't have to be a cyber expert. You can then tag people on your team. You can generate additional materials like the poems, which is really good because as part of the CMMC, you're going to need that requirement. But there are a lot of tools and services, as I said, that are either low cost or no cost. So we have curated vendors in this marketplace. So again, it enables manufacturers to go and know that they can use those, or maybe they have providers of their own that they want to use. But it's great because it provides an analysis of what your gaps are, and I think I have an image of that there. There's the marketplace. But then it gives you a ranking and scoring on what those vulnerabilities are and which ones you need to probably fix first to reduce your threats or your impacts on your network system. And so you can actually go on our website and do a kind of tour through it for free. And then I think there are potentially some assessments we're going to be allow individuals to do based on necessity and need. So, but this is live and operational, so I strongly encourage for anyone interested to look through this. I've walked through it myself, and I definitely am not a cybersecurity expert, but it's self-explanatory and really key for understanding how you can secure your assets. Again, here it's kind of giving you a description, so once you kind of see what products you need, you can really understand. So for example, multi-factor authentication, right? A lot of choices, a lot of options there, but again, telling you then also how it relates to securing or improving your cyber resilience as a manufacturer. With regards to Learn, again, this is a very important pillar of ours at MxD. We have this kind of mantra. We talk about the define, develop, and do. I briefly talked about that, but I'm going to mention it now. We have two very valuable assets that I strongly encourage anyone here today to download it. It is free. We have our digital taxonomy, so that defines roles in digital manufacturing that are needed today and tomorrow, really that future. We're actually going to do a refresh of that. That was done in 2017. But the hiring guide, so this is a cybersecurity hiring guide for manufacturing. So this outlines 247 roles in manufacturing that are, needs of cybersecurity in manufacturing. These are roles that are needed today, they're going to be needed tomorrow, and are very relevant. And I'll kind of give you a highlight. So there's, within the hiring guide, you have personas, you have profiles, you have pathways. So it's not just saying, here's what we think is needed. And this wasn't just us. We did this with NIST. We did it with other 25 organizations in partnership with Manpower. So these were actual industry, academic coming together and saying, these are the needs of the future, and then developing what those pathways are. And so that leads me to the next step, which is develop. So then taking those pathways and those skill sets, understanding what those are, we've now developed content around that. So again, the Cybersecurity for Manufacturing OT curriculum program in partnership with UMBC, there are 3 modules that you go through, and at the end you get a certificate that enables you to do this new role, so to speak, and they are skill sets or requirements that industry has already kind of vetted. So this is a great way to get into that. And we have another one in digital design and advanced manufacturing. So in the do side of things, we then enable everyone through our virtual training center. Again, this could be a standalone for your organization or for yourself. You can take these courses asynchronously, and we're looking really, as I'll say later, to have more content like this available so that anyone can take this and really develop. And so there's a need for this kind of once we've defined to develop the curriculum so that individuals can start taking that. And again, I'll make a call for that. But this is a critical part because, again, we're not the experts in cyber, but we're engaging our ecosystem to develop this content. And so if you're out there and interested in doing this, please reach out to me later. Here's just kind of a quick snapshot of the hiring guide. So you'll see there's career paths mentioned. There's success profile. So what does that look like in that role? You have a community of roles. So it's a whole kind of, as I said, 247 roles, and they're put in different communities and what those are. And then you have these personas that describe, like, what does that person do? You know, how did they get there? And again, it's just a really good document. And I know a lot of companies, members of ours, like Dow, have literally copy and pasted this for their HR, right, to know what to hire for. So it's a great asset at many different levels. The virtual training center, as I said, that's actually coming online in the coming months. This is really going to enable anyone who wants to start taking the content that we've developed and training themselves with these modules. And so again, as I said, you can see it's an open edX. We have over 1,000 free and some paid third-party content. So again, this is really a tool for allowing you to perhaps put your content on our portal, and right, we are capitalists, so that you get paid for it, so that's a great resource. But it's a tool, as I said, that's going to spread across the nation, and we're launching that here in the next month or so. So let me just now get into some examples of how we demonstrate this resiliency to manufacturers, or let them understand what are the critical aspects of cybersecurity, and I'm going to do that using the NIST cybersecurity framework. So that's the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So I'm not going to go through all of this. You can see it, and maybe most of you are familiar. Cybersecurity framework, raise your hand. Okay, great. So I'm preaching to the choir. Okay, so in terms of identify and protect, you'll come to our factory floor. You're going to see the cyber wall. Okay, on your left side, that's the unprotected side. On the right side is the protected side. So we talk about what's a router, right? What is segmenting? What is, application control? And then you'll see the green lights on the bottom there, and there's a PLC controlling that, and then there's a actuator controlling right here, the automatically controlled actuators. So we'll start that up, right? We will inject a thumb drive with a hack. Obviously, the unprotected side, you see, right? The windows pop up on the right side. The application control says, no, I don't know who you are. We send the hack through the unprotected side. Light goes off. The actuator starts jumping up and down. And yes, it's very basic. But when you see manufacturers face, because you ask them, hey, do you have any PLCs on the floor? Yes. Those are for programming, right, to run things. Small computers, I said, well, then you're vulnerable to hacks. And then they'll look, and then we show this, and the mouth just drops, right? Because chances are, if you have one of these, you have hundreds of these on your manufacturing floor. So I missed the identify part, so we show one of our members that has a program that will go throughout your network, right, and understand what your endpoints are, and so you have to identify your assets. So again, just talking to manufacturers about the basics. What are your assets on the floor? How do you protect them? Okay, we give those simple examples on that case. Because we knew that not everyone could come to Chicago prior to the pandemic, we had built our cyber box. So this is exact same thing on the wall, but condensed down into a box that we can take around. We were going to start our road shows in 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen, but we're out now and about doing those. But it's a great way, again, to take this out to manufacturers, to supply chains, to demonstrate these simple concepts. So it's a man-in-the-middle attack, and all these different things that we can do on the cyber box, because then manufacturers, once they see it, they understand how important it is. And then we provide them the basic resources, right? Don't just use the default password that comes with that PLC or whatever device, okay? Understand that you shouldn't give everyone access to every physical piece of equipment on your shop floor. I know that makes things easy, right? But that's how problems start arising. What's your segmentation process? What kind of architecture? So you can dive into these things, but there are a lot of things that you can do rather easily. With regards to the detect, respond, and recover, we have a process test skid. So remember, I said we have this test bed. So now, again, this was built over 6 months by our engineers and was launched just prior to the pandemic. So we didn't get much action on it since, but we're picking back up. And what we have here is the demonstration of on the left side, you have a tank holding clean water. This is dirty water, but it's really just yellow food coloring in there. And then we have a holder tank, right, for where you get your water. And so what we've done is really design this with the intent in mind that we know we're going to get compromised. So we design a solution in place, first of all. But we'll talk about identifying, right, using a intrusion detection network. We have physical or analog controls and digital controls on there. So again, sometimes you get false positives, right, that come out, and you can still check and really train and educating on that part. But the most important part is then we inject the hack, and so you'll see that this water now gets contaminated, right? So they empty it out, they've hacked in, they put the dirty water in there. What do you do? So you go through the respond and recover. Okay, what's your process? Who do you call? All these things, right? So you have this tool and resource for training, so you don't have to do it at your own facility. But then, as I said, you can use different algorithms for detection or different technologies to understand, how this applies to your setting. Again, and it's a resource that we've made available to our membership. So again, I'm winding down here. I hope you're enjoying, but really we want to partner with each and every one of you today. So there's probably some way we can. I'm unfortunately behind schedule on a meeting, so I'm going to have to leave shortly thereafter, but my contact info is on here. We really do want to and need to partner with you because, as I said, just like the bad actors, we have to join and unify. Even though we may not be in the same segments, we have the same problems, and that's that cyber threats, and we have to become resilient. As I said, I don't think this is anything groundbreaking, but digital is the future. But we really have to consider those cyber components how do we build that in? But then looking back to kind of older systems, how do we integrate these technologies in a way that will cause the least amount of pain to the manufacturers, and really to make them understand that it is actually a good business decision and not something that's negative to them. So again, I want to thank you for your attention and your time. This is all my contact information, or if not, I'm sure Kasi can get it to you. Just thanks again to Kasi and the Pan American, Asian American Business Council for this invite and for the honor to keynote today. If there are any questions, I'll take one maybe, but I will have to leave here shortly. So thanks again for your time.